This is the Leadership in Insurance podcast, brought to you by FinPro Search Partners.
Insurance companies are businesses and they need to look for the long term and be sustainable.
We went from 0 to 1 and now it's going from 1 to 100.
Insurance as a concept, as a kind of service, is brilliant. The execution is what we're looking at now.
I think the companies that are going to succeed are the ones that are going to understand and master the art of intent.
When we talk about innovation, we lean too heavily to think about technology, and we don't think about creating a culture of innovation.
I think innovation is essentially continuous improvement of existing processes and platforms and product.
Right? It's got to be easy. It's got to be seamless. Good morning and welcome to the Leadership in Insurance podcast. I'm your host, Alex Bond, and I'm very lucky today to be joined by Andy Moss, who's CEO and co-founder of Send Technologies. Andy, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing good. Yeah, I'm pleased to be invited to talk to you, Alex, and looking forward to discussing, a bit about the industry, a bit about Send. Yeah, it's good.
Awesome, good stuff. Well, thank you. And we've now hidden your cocktail kit because it made it look like you'd started drinking at about 11 o'clock in the morning. So,
but you've just mentioned it, so it's not terribly helpful.
Oh, I know, but I think it's funny. It's it's the realism we want to have in the podcast, Andy. We want to be talking to real people. So look, Andy, you'd have to be hiding under a rock if you didn't know who Send are, but it'd be really nice if you could introduce yourself and the Send business.
Yeah, so I'm Andy Moss. I'm one of the three co-founders at Send. We started in 2017 as a sort of self-funded startup in the insurance space. The business we're in is the sort of pre-bind space for commercial specialty P&C business, right? So that's a space that's historically been underinvested in. It's complex. The complexity rises with the number of data points used, and the different lines of business have different complexities to them. But what it boils down to, that pre-bind space is can have 20, 30 tasks. It can have more than 5 people involved in processing a submission to get to a quote. Brokers send stuff into insurers, and insurers go through all of these steps. And the coordination of that, the integration to systems, the use of data ingestion, that's the space we're in. And we have a solution in that space which tries to bring all of that together in one cohesive application, which we call the Underwriting Workbench. So that's really where we're at.
Awesome. Good. Well, that's got to be my first question, and I did this to workbench is a phrase that's been bandied around for a while now, but particularly I think that the space seems to be really hotting up. But I think it's really interesting because I don't know if everyone defines it in the same way. So I kind of wanted to know how internally you define underwriting workbench.
I think we'd call it the one-stop shop for underwriting. So it's where you bring together all of the work that contributes to the underwriting process, whether that's understanding the risk, doing the compliance side of things, cleaning up data, leveraging other data sets. It's bringing that all together in one place. So underwriters today typically are using 5 or 6 different systems, and they're copying and pasting stuff from one to another. They're doing the sort of swivel chair integration where they've got one application on one monitor and another on another monitor, and sort of that adds up to a lot of activity for underwriters. Maybe up to half of their time spent doing the admin work, and these are highly trained professional people who've might be at the pinnacle of their careers, and they line up on a Monday morning thinking, right, I've got a lot of copying and pasting to do. So bringing it together in one space is really valuable, and the benefits you get around all of the data together with that. For us, that's really the essence of what an underwriting workbench is.
I think that's why I've got so excited in this sort of space of technology with inside insurance, because it's the absolute kind of definition of kind of why technology serves a purpose in a business. It's saying we have highly skilled people doing tasks that we know they're overpaid to deliver that task. You know, there's no need to have a, you know, highly educated, you know, niche underwriter going, right, I'm going to copy and paste for 3 hours on a Monday morning. I mean, it's just lunacy. I think that takes us up to kind of like current state. But I was really interested in getting your thoughts of what's the future state of this type of product? Where does it, I suppose to a certain extent, probably where does that start and end, and that'll lead into what it means for the underwriter. But yeah, what's the future state of this sort of product?
I think before we do, I'll cover it in two ways. And one, before we get to the real future, a lot of companies just don't have technology in this space that's adequate. So there's a real value to be had in just getting the basics right. So the immediate future is track your submissions and manage them better. The down the line piece, you know, I guess where it goes for underwriters is that they should have access to technology that increasingly helps them do their job. So moving from the, you know, what we call perhaps the simple stuff in technology terms, so the workflows, the managing task lists and assigning stuff to people and tracking all of the things that need to happen, onto advising, you know, or suggesting things to the underwriter that they may not have spotted, that they may not be able to comprehend because there's, you know, 10 million data points on a submission. You can't possibly have all of that in your head. And, you know, especially in the Lloyd's market, you know, when we speak to some of the really specific lines of business, a lot of the underwriters, when you say to them, how do you price a risk, they'll still point to their head and it's like, you know, yeah, it's up here. And I think increasingly insurers are seeing that, you know, that the good underwriting performance, you know, correlates with good use of data, you know, and it's, I think giving underwriters the tools to be able to leverage that data. I'm going to mention AI, obviously, you know, that more of that co-pilot sort of approach, rather than, it's not about replacing underwriters, but it's about automating as much of what they do as possible. And we talk to underwriters who use our platform, they still want to be in the weeds with the data. They still want to be able to get to it. They don't want to leave everything to the machines, because some of it is simply down to judgment or a bit of commercial nous on a submission, and to get to the right outcome. So yeah, I just see it as an evolution, you know, increasing use of data, increasing use of AI, and more time for the underwriter to think about what they're doing and what they've got in front of them, and applying their judgment. That's how I see it evolving.
Yeah, the thing I kept thinking about when you were talking there about how some companies still don't have this type of platform, and I suppose it's not surprising, but I sort of find it a little bit surprising to a certain extent. In the same way that I you know, obviously I've worked for, you know, run a search firm, and I went to this meeting of other search firms. It was probably as awful as it sounds. It was like a conference for recruitment business owners. We talk about technology stacks, and it surprised me that certain bits of technology that we use lots of tech in our business. I just think certain things are like table stakes now, and I think something like this, it has to become part of your toolkit, because from a talent perspective, if I'm an underwriter and I can go work at company A that has your technology and company B that doesn't have any of that, I'm going to go work at company A because I want to have more, you know, high value time, challenging tasks. That's what people want to do. We're definitely going to get to that point where people won't go and work somewhere that's not investing in the stack, because that just, one, I think it sends a bad message about kind of how much you care about your people's time, and you therefore don't value it. So it's be interesting. I haven't had those conversations yet, but it wouldn't surprise me if I do start having those conversations. Because people are smart and they don't want to waste their time. But that leads me on to a question I was going to say about engagement, because, you know, we are talking about, you know, internationally, but let's still talk about Lloyd's London market. You do have the underwriters that, as you rightly said, still go, it's all up here. do people struggle to engage? Have you had feedback from your sort of customers when they get it, but are people engaging with it? How do we encourage that people to sort of engage and adopt their behaviours?
I think we see quite a variety. So we've got, across our customer base and some of the other businesses in the market that we talk to, you see companies that are, I guess, big incumbents that have got lots of legacy tech, and people have that swivel chair thing where they've got a problem. They may not identify that as something that might hold them back, but it's something that probably annoys them. And you will get engagement on that. But I think where we see the most traction, where we see the most interest and engagement, there's a breed of insurers at the moment that are looking at tech, and it's the business people, it's the CEOs, the lead underwriters on a line of business that are saying, well, I need technology to help me do this better. And where that's happening, we get amazing traction. We get the where an underwriting team can see that if they use this tech well, they'll be able to respond to brokers more quickly. They'll know what they're turning away in terms of business, and know therefore what the opportunity is in that space. They'll know that they can bring new data sets in, and that they can use that to make better informed decisions. And whether it's appetite checks, whether it's assessment of the risk, we bring in data sets that pertain to companies, financial probity, compliance, lots of location services we use to bring in information around property. So leveraging all of that data, if you've got teams that look at that and say, well, you know what, this is something that will make our underwriting processes better, will give us, help us build a better book of business. So it's not about installing an IT system for us and then thinking, well, how do we bring the users on board? It's now a competitive dynamic for insurers, that the insurers that will lead in the next 5 years are the ones that are really focused on that and taking the opportunities that the technology brings. A lot of our customers, for instance, want to grow the business without a linear increase in headcount, right? Yeah. So they want to be able to do more with less. They want to be able to see, more of the submissions that are coming in, and quite a few of the customers don't get to all of them without having technology in place. So they've got this deluge of submissions coming in. In an ideal world, they want to get the best submissions and quote on them as quickly as possible. You can't do that without technology for the volume some of these businesses are dealing with.
Yeah, and there's a couple of things in there that it's interesting. It has to come essentially from the underwriters, and the want has to be there from the engagement. But at the same time, as I can see what you're saying, and you'll talk about the solution that you're offering rather than, oh, we'll use this new technology. It's not that. It's like, do you want to write more business and better business? And you go, yes, okay, let's do this then. So yeah, really interesting to kind of weigh. It's about people's perception of what this is, I think, because sometimes if you get a top-down instruction to use technology, it's almost like an automatic pushback against that, going, oh, what do they know? But if you present it as this and say, do you want to write more business and better business, it's like, because that's how my bonus is paid.
But then it's the we're all in this together. We've got to deliver as if you're a technology partner in that space, and the underwriting teams are saying, I want this as an outcome. You better be ready to push and make sure that happens as well. So it's definitely a fascinating space. I think we're just seeing more and more investment going into that pre-bind space, whether it's on workbenches or AI or pricing solutions or submission management. There's so much going on at the moment.
Yeah, really, really interesting how the market's heating up, and it's good to see as well. And I think it's that I've said this. We had the kind of distribution deluge of, of insurtech investment, and then now we're seeing kind of businesses which solve not that they weren't real world problems, but for me it's like people coming out of the insurance ecosystem and building solutions for problems that they know exist, and this sits so squarely in that, which I think is why it's resonating so much with the investment market. We're talking about investment. Obviously, you guys raised a pretty significant amount of money. I know expansion into the US is one of the plans, or is part of the journey already. We talked about before this call. We talked about the perception problem with UK companies going into the US. Do we still think that perception problem is an issue? And how are you going about that kind of US expansion? What's the plan for you guys there?
Yeah, so where do I start with that? There's quite a few bits in there. So I think firstly our sort of expansion, our expansion into the US, we've got a number of customers, and interest is growing. We expect that to, grow significantly over the next couple of years. I think coming from Lloyd's London market is it's double-edged sword, right? Because you go to US and a lot of people in the US will look at what goes on with Lloyd's and think it's really prestigious, and London market think it's fascinating, and I think there's definitely that's the pros for us in terms of you've come out of a market that's got a pedigree that's difficult to penetrate from a technology perspective. It's not easy to start up in Lloyd's and London market and grow a business in the way we have. So that's on the sort of upside. On the downside, US carriers will sometimes look at things and say, well, we're different. You don't understand things. And I think what we've tried to do the last couple of years working with our US partners is really build out a view of there's actually a lot that is absolutely the same. There might be terminology differences, there might be different ways of approaching things, but no more variety than we might see between two businesses in the UK, right, in terms of how they look at things. And from an underwriting perspective, that's sometimes a secret sauce that a particular insurer has. So that hasn't put us off, though. I think we have had to obviously do some, localization, make sure things are right and get it right for the US market. So we've had a lot of investment go into that. We're building out the team there. So we've hired 4 people this year in the US, and that brings with it interesting dynamics for the company in terms of the big time zone differences, and so we've really got to support the US team well, and we're the founders and key people in the exec. We're doing a lot more travel than we're used to. We're going over to the US. I think from an investment perspective, it's also quite interesting that I get we raised our Series A round with European-based investors, and what we see in the US, certainly in this space and sort of adjacent spaces where close to Underwriting Workbench or that sort of pre-bind space, we see US investors investing pre-revenue, pre-product even, and it just doesn't happen in Europe. So they're more willing to roll the dice in the US and back the investments, and that's interesting for us. And we're I guess we didn't go to the US looking for investment for that Series A, and there's just a different environment, just a different, it's more conservative in Europe, it seems. So yeah, there's some initial thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think there's so many touch points there, and I'm sorry, I'm really guilty of this podcast of asking like a triple load of questions. So you have to do the hard work of breaking it back down. So I think you did a good job.
That's what I tried to do, yeah.
But no, I that investment thing really resonates with us. I mean, we work across the US and UK, and what's interesting as well is I think the entrepreneurs either side of the pond have a different dynamic as well, because we work with so many more companies that were bootstrapped and then and then got some revenue and then raised some money in the UK. Whereas like almost that's seen as, why would you do that in the US? It's like you'll go out and
Absolutely.
raise money
Yeah.
straight away, which as someone that runs his own business, it sort of terrifies me. The idea of going, well, you're sort of going, well, this is my best guess. This is might work. Let's go off. And of course, it's all smart, generally smart people making, pretty educated decisions. But being out pre-revenue, I think, is fascinating. The pre-product stuff, thankfully, I think we're seeing a little bit less of. So I've always just found that just fascinating and not in a good way. Slightly horrifying. But the boots on the ground thing is really hard as well, and I think getting that right is really difficult because you want cultural add, you don't want cultural fit. I'm a big believer in that. So there will be differences, but it still needs to work and communication needs to flow. And we do a lot more a lot more work with the kind of New York area than we do with California, just because of time zone differences. So yeah, there's so many challenging things there, but I think getting those boots on the ground just means a lot. It's very difficult to say we can travel as much as we like. I know both of us are obviously going to be in Vegas next week, but for ITC, but travel's not quite the same as having people there, is it, that represent you as a business? And they can be your translation internally between what we really mean. Because the irony, I was thinking about, you talk about Lloyd's, I talk to a lot of US businesses trying to come to the UK, and they're all obsessed with getting into Lloyd's. And I'm going, you've got this enormous insurance market that I feel like sometimes I'm a bit sort of pushed back and go, you're creating a headache that you don't necessarily need. But yeah, that prestige thing, I think, plays both ways as well. So
yeah, I also think it's a small world on that front. We're often talking to or working with London-based insurers who are expanding into the US, and who've got an international business, part of which might be in the UK and London market. So it's we're quite often talking to businesses that are global anyway. So it's kind of, that helps join the dots for us sometimes. Do you see that? Do you see I guess do you see challenges when you're helping expanding teams from London into the US? Do you see the challenges there?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big thing about what we do, and there's so many challenges. I mean, the first one, compensation. Like America is just and different roles have different compensations. So I think that's really difficult. It's a very expensive place to hire, particularly if you go to some of the major cities. I think culturally it's really hard, and particularly when you're first out there, because you're almost always going to be the person that's going to have to be fully remote. And how do you make them feel part of the team when if the team's really London centric and everyone's here, and there's this little culture, how do they get on board with it? But as to your point, a lot of these people have come out of these big multinational, multi-site organizations, so they're kind of used to that. But depends how much they've worked in a really joined up environment, because I used to work for RSA, and then I worked for Hayes. So I've worked for big corporate businesses. But I always say it's quite interesting because when you're hiring someone and someone might push back and go, "Oh, that person doesn't have startup experience," or they've worked at a big company. I worked in Hayes, but I worked for Hayes Insurance brand, which is only 120 people. So it felt like working for a 120 person business. And within that, I sat in London doing the London market, of which I think there was about 35. So you were going, right. It felt like I worked for a 35 person business. I just happened to work for a FTSE listed company. So I think those cultural pieces are the hardest thing, but you have to really break down that person's actual working lived experience. Did you, because it's very lazy to say, oh, this person worked for a Munich Re, or they were, or a big technology company like a Guidewire. But if they work for a really small part of that, or they work for a small team, it's like there's more similarities there. But it's the biggest challenge. I mean, and we get it both ways. I mean, that's a lot of what we do. First boots on the ground in the US, or first boots on the ground in the UK, and swap that round. Talking about talent, actually, I mean, I don't think we can talk about workbenches without talking about what this sort of technology means for the underwriter of the future. And I asked this question all around, but how do you see it? I think not like, I think we know the job role is going to change, and it's going to be focused on higher value tasks, and to do you think that the talent pool we need to attract needs to be more kind of tech native or tech savvy?
Yeah, that's it's definitely something we see, that the evolution of the role. So when if you want to automate and you want to do something significant in the underwriting space, you need someone who can get their head around what they do today and how that would translate into a technology enabled process. So, and that includes not just lifting and shifting. It's looking at, well, what's the downside of this? What can we get away with? What's our tolerance on the technology making, some of the decisions here, versus the upsides of what could we do with technology that we wouldn't otherwise be able to do. And having someone from the business in the underwriting space who gets their head around as much of that as possible is such a value add, is such an enabler for projects in that area. And I think we already see in underwriting, it's a team sport anyway, right? So there's we see on average across our customers, a given a submission will have 5 people on average touch it, as well as a load of automation stuff going on. And those 5 people could be doing operational stuff, they could be actuarial, they could be compliance team, they could be, I don't know, scrubbing some data, and then you've got underwriters looking at it as well. And I think really being able to see through all of that and identify the opportunities, it's tough. It's not an easy thing. We see a lot more insurers hiring data scientists or kind of the sort of multi-skilled people who can have a foot in a few different camps, and whether you call it innovation or whether they gravitate towards a data role or something like that. We're seeing more of those sort of more variety in the roles that are coming in. What it means for underwriters, I think, is that there needs to be we need the types of underwriters that will be able to work with technology and change teams and technology partners and work out the art of the possible and make it happen. And so changing your role from doing the do to explaining to other people and working with them, collaborating on how you could automate bits of that out. It makes it, I think it polarizes it. It makes it more complex. It's a more complex role, more challenging role, but there's obviously a lot of upside to it to be able to define that. But at the other end of the spectrum, we've got to play with AI enabled underwriting, where we're not assuming that AI will get things right every time. So there's a lot of vendors that will say AI is going to replace this role or that role. What we've done is look at it as, well, you can have some indication of confidence around something, but sometimes you just need to pop it in front of a person and let them make a judgment, and that might boil down to be might be like micro tasks, like just here's something, here's what we found, is this right or not? So that's the other end of the spectrum. You've got people perhaps doing more variety of smaller tasks, and you've got these people at the other end of the spectrum who are perhaps designing a technology enabled underwriting solution with the change people, with the technologists. So yeah, that's I do think about it a lot. That's kind of how I see it evolving. Yeah, definitely I can think of a couple of our customers that have gone to market as they're building their business over the last few years, and as part of the job spec for the underwriting teams have said, we need people who have worked in with strong technology, because they're looking for the people that have the maturity and experience of working with, not just doing the underwriting, not just being the deal maker, but also the thinker who's going to go and work with the technologists to come up with something great.
Yeah, I mean, I think the trend is really interesting. I mean, there's so many things that we've seen on our side. You know, we've worked with a few businesses on getting these kind of like innovation underwriting teams put together, for example, and the profiles for them have been interesting because they've been different per business. You know, not every business looks at this the same way as you rightly kind of alluded to. And you know, we've seen a lot more kind of trees moving over to underwriting because they've got a core understanding of like, you know, the rating and all that puts together and the pricing model, and therefore they're in a way better set up to work with these types of products because you know they're sort of start an early point of the value chain and then but are they commercial enough is always the question that gets asked. And then the other thing we're seeing is, you know, we're seeing things that are like net new risks. You know, we talk about things like, you know, we had our Miller on and they've got an AI, you know, product, and you go, well, I've pushed back on this quite hard. Cyber was another one, but whereas we're going, are we doing enough as an industry to pull in people that are from cybersecurity world or artificial
Mm.
intelligence and go, right, would you be interested in being an underwriter? But we've got to make that role interesting enough. And I think tools like this help you get towards that because then you're kind of using your expert input to build the engine that kind of gets you the result you need. But the side effect of that is that we've seen businesses, particularly in the US, actually, we've seen this some digital MGAs where they've really tried to automate almost all of the underwriting. And then actually we've had people leave some of those businesses to go as an underwriter, they've gone, my role is now actually not interesting. It's just it's human in the loop. So there's a real polarizing thing of going, I think they're going to create some really awesome and interesting jobs in the underwriting space. And then there's also kind of, you know, am I just kind of like checking up on it? So, and it's getting the balance of those two things right. One's probably really good for businesses, but it's also got to be good for the team. I'm really conscious of your time, so I'm gonna move on because I think we could kick that run around for a
Oh
while.
yeah. I love the topic. I just want to say one more thing. It's kind of
Sure.
no one's I guess no one's going to be disappointed to see the admin stuff go away. All of the rekeying, copying, and
absolutely not.
pasting. So that's the first thing that's really up for grabs. You know, that I don't think that there should be too many. There won't be too many underwriting teams all that worried about that side of things.
No, I agree. And I put my hippie hat on about this the other day. And I got some stick for it from some of my friends. But I said a lot of automation, when automation came in, and the simplest way to look at this, when there was a load of automation tools for the household, right? And we first started getting dishwashers and washing machines, people were talking about, oh, maybe we'll just work less. You know, like we won't have to work 5 days a week. And I think sometimes we kind of plow into let's just kind of like look at it from profitability angle. If we look at it from an enjoyment of having more fun at work or enjoying your work more, I think that's that's also the first things up to grabs because exactly to your point, just getting rid of all the stuff that people don't really want to be doing is instantly creates this much nicer working environment where people are doing kind of higher value, interesting work. And I took it a step further, going, well, maybe we could just go. You can start doing job shares, and everyone looked at me like I was mad. So,
Oh well, no, I think you're onto something there. But hold that thought, and we'll see how it plays out.
exactly. I think this is. I always like to kind of have a podcast where we can kind of have people come away from this with maybe some sort of ideas, and you're an expert in this space. So I was going to ask you, what are the top 3 things and you might encourage listeners to take away from this podcast and sort of implement to get them ready for this evolution of underwriting that's coming?
Yeah, I think first thing I go for is what I mentioned earlier. It's a team sport, and you know that how underwriting that underwriting evolution happens in the next few years will be around the collaboration. You know, it will be around people seeing the opportunities, where the handoffs are, where the bottlenecks are. That's the first thing, really. I think the second one is that, you know, there's a lot of investment being put into the pre-bind space. I think the insurers that take advantage of that are going to really reap the benefits. I guess the third thing, you know, we're at Send, we're hoping we're the ones pushing the pushing the boundaries on that, and you know, we've done a lot of investment into the space. We've got active pipeline of sort of ideas coming from some of these underwriting teams. You know, don't just think internally, go and talk to your vendors and push them hard to help make the difference. There's a great cohort of companies like Send out there that are really really wanting to make a difference, and but you know, they need the input, they need the challenge, and we welcome that.
Yeah. It's I also I think people don't they don't reach out enough. I say this in my space. It's like there's loads of input that we can give people for free. Like, and we're happy to do it. You know, like, we want to give that feedback because we need it as well. And you know, it's like to a certain extent, it's like just talking to the vendors and knowing what's out there, because you kind of, until you know what the possibilities are, how can you set your business up for the future? Because you don't know what the balls and opportunities are along the way. So yeah, I'm not saying your business is going to give free technology advice for that'd be a bad pitch to end on. I think we'd get in trouble. Andy, pleasure. Thank you so much for taking time out. I know we're going to get a chance to kind of see each other in the flesh in Vegas, but yeah, really appreciate you being a guest on the podcast.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Thanks, Alex. Thanks for inviting me, and yeah, look forward to catching up next week.
Thank you very much.